holds true for things like auctions, the ability to act on a substantial portion of that huge pile of data that's been transiently cached locally. And in order to achieve these local speeds and feeds, we need control over some lower level of operations than are typically available. Characteristics like the ability to verify that a write to a disk has actually completed, not made it to a disk write cache kind of thing, but all the way pushed out, kind of important for logging updates, that kind of thing. Access to low-level test and set operations. For a lot of operations, the mutex operations just are too slow. And being able to control object placement in memory so that you can fetch in big blocks of data from the disk in a single I/O operation instead of a gazillion little piddly operations. So some additions there.
So Jim, about 4 minutes.
4 minutes,
yeah.
Okay. So to meet these needs, I could build outside the VM as I do today. We do that all the time in a traditional JDBC, ODBC kind of domain. Oftentimes it's too slow. Can't get the data fast enough. I need the data directly within the memory of the VM in order to get those local speeds and feeds. It's also often inflexible. Changing the schema, that central data warehouse, is hard without requiring simultaneous changes to all of the clients, and you know, you got 150,000 clients for a given database and say, everybody upgrade the software today. That doesn't quite work that way. I could also build on top of a VDE. Derby's an example of that, but again, oftentimes it's too slow. It just can't handle the necessary data volumes. The mere cost of object creation in a lot of these cases becomes prohibitive. I've heard numbers around like 7 instructions or something like that. I'd like to know how they're doing that, because that doesn't quite match my experience. Critical sections become bottlenecks, the need for more physical control. And we always need to play games to avoid embarrassing GC hiccups, because it isn't going on concurrently in most cases today. So one of the obvious things to look at is to build at least parts of it in the VM. It doesn't have to be everything. There's huge chunks that can live on top of the VM, but there's clearly chunks that would benefit both sides if they could be built directly. Okay, so and that really was the motivation for this talk, to come forward to this community and say, we from the database side would like to work with you on exploring what would be good additions to the VM for handling these large amounts of data, the data interoperations, to see if there is some common ground for enhancements. Okay. What questions does anybody have?
I'd like to counter your argument that building inside the VE is so problematic, because with concurrent marking, CMS, concurrent marking suite, parallel GC, you don't have as many embarrassing hiccups these days. So instead of trading off some of the other issues you raised, we have to create strings of SQL operations, socket connections to remote databases, parse that information and switch process contexts, and then compile your SQL and start processing the SQL, wait for your query to complete, manage all these thread pools on multiple processes in order to speed things up, rather than having it in the same address space where your object information, meta information could be more closely tied to the way it looks inside the VM. To avoid this conversion that we're doing, searches would be faster, you could cache more information in memory. I don't think enough has been done in that area.
I don't think we're speaking different languages there at all.
Okay.
I think we're on the same page. If we have the data engine, the same VM, as we've got the client applications, then a lot of those costs either are dramatically reduced or vanish altogether.
Well, let me ask that question again.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I've gotten the impression that the garbage collectors in virtual machines in use for things like Java have dramatically improved in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of low pause time, reasonably high performance, reasonably low, cache latency. Is this true in the real world, or not really?
I think ask VM implementers can answer that.
Well,
The answer is yes. However, ask a user.
Here's our EE developer here. Is it true? Garbage collection is not as big as you?
That is one of our biggest issues.
It's still one of the things
Correctness
in
and
today?
performance.
And the Java VMs and similar things out there in the last 3 or 4 years have not
They
gotten a lot
are
better.
improving, yes. Of course, if you want to deploy them, you are not on the latest versions normally. So if you talk about it improved the last year, we don't see it. It improved the last 2 years, we are beginning to see it. Sometimes we have to see it because it's simply not working. But we had 4 weeks ago, we needed to exchange a complete garbage collector on the platform.
And what is the performance problem? Is it stuck with time or memory? What is the performance problem that you see? Is it time or
It's
memory?
time. It's often time. So we are seeing really huge garbage heaps, huge pressure on the garbage collector. So most of the time what we see is simply that it's stalling the whole VM in the end, even if it's parallel, but most of them are not stable enough.
So latency.
And it's a latency, it's simply a user experience thing. So like the VM stalling for 20 seconds or even longer. Yes, we've seen that on really fast hardware.
Dozens of gigabytes.
Objects I was
Yeah.
Small.
Okay, guys, one more comment. I think Suresh, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of know whether any of these database issues also have things to do with strings and XML stuff. It's also kind of what's happening. Is that one of the data primitives that we also need to consider for future VPEs?
We currently go out of our way to not use strings in a Java environment just because of the cost of creating. Character array is a much better alternative, and that's what we end up using. So yeah, strings are stinky poo poo.
But XML is just string, right?
Well, XML is a different discussion point because string is one representation for XML, but there's a gazillion other representations for XML. But the assertion strings are stinky poo poo, I think, is pretty fair.
Okay, on that note, let's thank Tim.